For many UFO buffs, sightings are not a contemporary phenomenon. According to them, there's undeniable proof throughout the world that we were visited long ago by beings from outer space. These visitors supposedly left permanent traces of their passage here on Earth. Were our ancestors' gods actually astronauts from another planet? In the aftermath of World War II, the UFO phenomenon became all the rage in the media. At first, it was thought that these unidentified flying objects were Russian or American secret weapons. Then the public began speculating that they were alien spaceships. Apparently, these mysterious visitors were concerned over the invention of the atomic bomb. Then, in the 1960s, popular authors threw a spin in the contemporary timeline of these sightings. They explained that aliens had not landed for the first time in 1947, but rather several thousand years earlier. Louis Pauwels, Jacques Bergier, Robert Charroux, Zecharia Sitchin, and especially Erich von Daniken heralded in this new vision of ancient astronauts.
There's another whole area of interest in UFOs, which is usually labelled the ancient astronauts, and most popularised by the author Erich von Daniken, and in fact actually by a lot of other people even before him. He, as often happens, he was more the person who brought it to the public than actually created much of that in the first place. He certainly extended his researches beyond what a lot of those had done, and I'd have to say I think sometimes some of his researches were, shall we say, a little shaky at times. What he did in real service, more than the evidence he put forward, was that he brought the subject to the fore and he got people interested in it, and some of those people did very good research into it. Ancient astronaut theory basically says that the if you like, UFO people or some kind of entities visited the Earth many, many years ago and were part of the formation of our history. There are many possibilities. They could have been the entities that we regarded as our first gods, perhaps. They could be the origins of the human race. They could be the people who created the human race and so on. And ancient astronaut theory certainly looks back on that as that possibility.
Alors, la théorie des anciens astronautes,
the theory of ancient astronauts, which has a very long history, was first introduced to the public in the 1960s, when Louis Pauwels and Jacques Bergier wrote a book on the subject called The Morning of the Magicians, which became a huge success.
Éditorial et commercial. Et ce succès a ouvert la porte à d'autres.
Its success paved the way for other authors who had been thinking along the same lines. And soon, other books began appearing on the market.
Éditorial ainsi créé pour produire de nouveaux ouvrages et pour les publier. Et c'était les cas.
In 1963, French author Robert Charroux wrote a book dedicated solely to the theory of ancient astronauts. And then, in 1968, Swiss author Erich von Daniken wrote Chariots of the Gods, which became a huge international success.
Un grand succès commercial avec son livre et traduit en français sous le titre La présence des extraterrestres et en 1968.
In the late 1960s, Swiss author Erich von Daniken wrote a bestseller called Chariots of the Gods, which explained how aliens had visited Earth in ancient times and had crafted dozens of famous archaeological relics. His theory soon spread throughout the world. Well, perhaps a bit less in France, where the same ideas had already been introduced by Robert Charroux.
When Charroux published his first book on ancient astronauts in 1963, there was a major difference between it and the book written by Pauwels and Bergier, which had first introduced the idea that perhaps aliens had visited ancient Earth and had created the human race and civilization. Charroux took the same theory and provided so-called facts to back it up, such as archaeological monuments and extracts from holy scriptures of different religions.
Des textes, des livres sacrés, des diverses religions, et son ouvrage très volumineux.
His thick book was filled with what he considered to be valid proof of this theory.
Comme preuve. Et
Von Daniken took the same approach. He wanted to show that the human race had been created by extraterrestrial beings. His book was filled with facts designed to prove this.
De preuves factuelles. Son succès et son livre est un succès beaucoup plus grand que celui de Charroux.
It was much more of a success than Charroux's because Daniken was able to express himself in very simple terms,
Robert Charroux, qui vient
whereas Robert Charroux came from a more occult, esoteric background and tended to use a language level that most people could not understand, filled with allusions that were difficult to decipher, unless you came from the same background as he did.
Qui sont imprégnés comme lui de cette tradition, de cette culture ésotérique.
Von Daniken, on the other hand, used a clear and concise language that the average person could understand.
Et on les comprend.
But was there any basis to the questions raised by these authors? According to them, the Great Pyramid of Cheops, found on Egypt's Giza Plateau, a true architectural feat, could not have been built without extraterrestrial intervention. Fact or fantasy?
If we want to determine whether the Egyptians really built the pyramids themselves, or whether they had outside help from extraterrestrials, because they were simply too huge and too complex for the time, then I think we need to look at known scientific data. We shouldn't stray from known facts and propose wild theories. If we look at historical data on how the pyramids were built, how the work was organized, and what goals the Egyptians had in mind when they built these monuments, then I think the facts speak for themselves. Obviously, some of the details are missing, and the more archaeologists investigate, the more the answers they find lead to further questioning. But we don't need visitors from outer space to explain the existence of the pyramids.
Évidemment, comme d'habitude, mais on n'a véritablement pas besoin d'intervenants extérieurs pour expliquer ce qui s'est passé.
It's easy to talk about extraterrestrials these days. The idea that they exist has been around for a long time. But now they're being seen in a different light. I personally don't believe all those stories about aliens building pyramids or Mesopotamian temples. Explanations were given long ago on how the pyramids were built, and they were more complicated than the Mesopotamian temples, since the pyramids were made from large stones that had to be carried across great distances. The pyramids of Giza were built from stones that may have come from Aswan, a village at the other end of the Nile. There are still quarries in Aswan where you can see the vestiges of these huge blocks that were cut and shipped by barge to the lower end of the Nile to be used in building pyramids. The Sumerians, on the other hand, used sun-dried and baked bricks to make their temples, which was much easier at the time since there were no stones available in their region.
How and with what were the stone blocks cut out of the quarries? How were they transported and joined together to the thousandth of an inch, asks von Daniken in Chariots of the Gods. Von Daniken feels that nothing else can explain how builders overcame the difficulties involved in putting together a structure like the Great Pyramid. Imagining that the builders placed 10 stone blocks per day, each weighing about 15 tons, he figured that it should have taken 664 years to place the 2 million plus stones used in its construction. The problem is that von Daniken multiplied the true weight of the stones by 10 and added an extra 300,000 stones in his calculations.
Bon, quand on aborde la construction de la pyramide de Khéops ou Khufu,
whenever we discuss the building of the Cheops Pyramid, or Khufu, as it was known in ancient Egypt, the first thing that everyone wants to do, be it students or authors, is to quantify everything. How many stone blocks did they use? How were they moved? How long did it take? These questions can be answered. On average, the blocks weighed about 2.5 tons each. They could have been hauled on a wooden sled by a team of 14 to 17 men. This calculation was based on the time that it took to haul the 2 million plus stones that were required during the time period that we know the pyramid was built. Some blocks were bigger, weighing more than 10 tons, but they weren't used as often. They served primarily for what might be considered the roof. Naturally, these blocks took longer to move, and more men were required to haul them.
Apparently, some people prefer to believe that the construction of these extraordinary monuments was due to some mysterious intervention rather than human ingenuity, crafting, and patience. There's something basic that these people are forgetting, and that's the fact that these pyramids and temples were built by thousands of workers at a time when laborers came cheap, if not free, and unions were unheard of. These days, it's hard to believe that such a huge project could have been designed and built by humans. The pyramids could never be reproduced. They're one of the 7 wonders of the world. Denying the human aspect of this project merely shows a blatant lack of interest in what archaeology or history might be trying to tell us.